The NFL fighting back in a show of unity after President Trump called on team owners to fire players who kneel during the national anthem.
Time running short for the Republican health care bill, and opposition to the bill growing by the day as a new version of the bill attempts to target key votes.
Breaking overnight, the White House rolling out a new travel ban and expanding it to 8 countries, including North Korea and Venezuela. Good morning and welcome to Early Start. I'm Ryan Nobles in this morning for Dave Briggs.
Nice to see you this Monday morning. I'm Christine Romans. It is Monday, September 25th, 5 a.m. in the East. Good morning. Rise and shine. Up first, a league-wide show of solidarity. NFL players and owners united in protest against President Trump after a weekend of relentless attacks. He condemned players who choose not to stand for the national anthem. In stadiums across the country Sunday, even in London, where an NFL game was being played, players locked arms, they kneeled, they raised their fists during the national anthem. Some teams skipped the anthem entirely, the whole team staying in the locker room.
And this was remarkable. Even some national anthem singers were bending a knee. In a game in Detroit and in one in Nashville, singers actually joined the protest, kneeling along with the players on the sidelines. This, of course, all began when the president made these remarks at a rally in Alabama on Friday night.
Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get that son of a bitch off the field right now, out, he's fired. He's fired!
And he did not stop there. The president tweeting nearly a dozen times about protests by pro athletes, including this. If NFL fans refuse to go to games until players stop disrespecting our flag and country, you will see change take place. Fire or suspend. In response to the player demonstrations Sunday, the president tweeted, great solidarity for our national anthem and for our country. Standing with locked arms is good. Kneeling is not acceptable. Bad ratings.
Mike Tomlin, who's the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, one of the 3 teams that remained in their locker rooms during the national anthem, said that his players acted in unison.
We didn't ask for this. This was placed upon us by circumstance. I heard rumblings of guys talking during the course of the day yesterday. My contention was that we will not allow politics to divide us with football players, with football team. If many of them felt like something needed to be done, I asked those guys to discuss it. And whatever they discussed, that, we have 100% participation or we do nothing.
Now, many say President Trump is capitalizing on the politics of racial division. This is how he responds to that criticism.
This has nothing to do with race. I've never said anything about race. This has nothing to do with race or anything else. This has to do with respect for our country and respect for our flag.
And it's not just the NFL. The president going after LeBron James and Steph Curry, 2 of the world's most popular athletes. Trump withdrawing Curry's invite to the White House. Let's bring in CNN's Andy Scholes for more on the NFL's day of mass protest. Certainly was an odd day in the NFL, to say the least, Andy.
Yeah, it was, Ryan. And it was clear that players on nearly every team had a plan on how they were going to show that they were unified after President Trump's comments. Some players took a knee, some sat, many locked arms during the national anthem. And for the first time, we saw owners from teams around the league, some who donated to President Trump's campaign, standing arm in arm with their players during the anthem, showing that they had their backs. And after the games yesterday, players around the league explaining why they decided to do a show of unity.
You mess with one, you mess with us all. Nobody is divided in this. We was in unity. We want to stand for something. Just telling you right now, this man's not welcome here.
As a man, as a father, as an African-American man, as somebody in the NFL, as one of those sons of yeah, I took it personally. I got a daughter. She gonna have to live in this world. You know what I'm saying? And I'm gonna do whatever I gotta do to make sure, she can look at my dad, look at her dad and be like, hey, you did something, you tried to make a change, you feel me?
I think it's very unbecoming of the office of the President of the United States to talk like that, to degrade people like that. I will always feel that if you are an American, that the national anthem is the opportunity for us all to stand up together, to be unified, and to show respect for our country.
Now, the Steelers, Titans, and Seahawks all decided to remain in the locker room during the national anthem yesterday. All the players except for one of the Steelers, Alejandro Villanueva, is a former Army Ranger. He did 3 tours in Afghanistan after graduating from West Point, and you can see he stood in the tunnel alone with his hand on his heart. So clearly he did not agree with the team's decision to remain in the locker room during the national anthem. And you know, guys, it is a league rule that you're supposed to be on the sideline for the national anthem, but we reached out to the NFL and they said they are not considering any fines or punishment for players that did not go out onto the field for the national anthem.
All right, Andy Scholes, thanks so much for that this morning. Let's bring in Eugene Scott, staff writer for the Washington Post and a friend of the program.
Yes.
You know, one of the things that I think is interesting about this debate is that the president frames this as these athletes who kneel during the national anthem are against America, that they're against the country. And what these athletes have said again and again is they're against racial inequality.
Right.
They're against police brutality. They're against a whole host of other things. And some of these athletes have different reasons for taking a knee. The White House has tried to cast this as these people are against the American military. They're against America. They're somehow un-American. Listen to the Treasury Secretary, Stephen Mnuchin, how he framed it yesterday with Jake.
This is about respect for our military. This is about respect for our first responders. This is not about Republicans or Democrats. Players have the right for free speech off the field. On the field, this is about respect for lots of people.
So one of the things that so many of these athletes have said, starting with Colin Kaepernick more than a year ago, is that they feel disrespected.
Sure.
This is about respecting everyone. It has nothing to do with the military.
Right. When you're protesting systemic discrimination or racism, what you are saying is that I feel disrespected and I feel devalued and I want to speak out against that. Colin Kaepernick has been very vocal, in fact, saying, I am not anti-American. I love America. And the fact that when some people hear I hate racism, the fact that they hear I hate America, I think speaks to what they are bringing to the table in terms of not actually listening to the protests that the athletes want to highlight.
I think also lost on all of this was that up until yesterday, the vast majority of NFL players stood for the national anthem. It wasn't until the president made these comments that we saw this wide and mass protest of athletes of both black and white.
Yeah, and I think it was intentional, right? The reality is when the president has a bad week in terms of policy, he switches to the cultural anxiety issue. Last week was not great for health care. We had new findings with Russia and Paul Manafort. The president was called a dotard. And so he went to Alabama and talked to these voters who got on board the Trump train early and propelled his campaign and reminded them of the things that they, in polling we have, say they don't like most about America.
The president says this has nothing to do with race, nothing to do at all with race. He doesn't mention race, and he was very animated at that Joint Base Andrews. But the optics here are that the president was slow to criticize white supremacists in Charlottesville, but very quick to condemn sons of bitches on a football field.
Right. This was not the first time this has been an issue. The reality is, if you look at the campaign, even from day one, like the president has tapped into some people's cultural anxiety and their challenges that they were having with people of new races and new ethnicities coming into the country. I don't know if that was him being dishonest or if there's a full disconnect, but the fact that you could say me calling anti-racist protesters sons of bitches is not about race is quite the shock.
And you mentioned it already, Eugene. It's not as if the president doesn't have a full plate. Dealing with the fallout from natural disasters, a number of legislative items on his docket, including the fight over health care. This is what the president had to say about health care over the weekend. Take a listen.
I've been watching for 7 years as the Republicans have been saying repeal and replace. Then you have John McCain voting no for whatever reason. And by the way, Arizona is one of the biggest beneficiaries. Even the governor, Ducey, is totally in favor of it. It's also great for Maine. It's also great for Alaska. Every state you're talking about, it happens to be particularly good for. So I don't know what they're doing, but you know what? Eventually we'll win, whether it's now or later.
Having spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill, I can tell you there are very few people that think they're going to win on health care. Is the way he responded over the weekend a way to kind of avoid this topic because it's clearly an area where he is a little deficient?
Well, absolutely. I mean, there was far more attention on these protests this weekend than the fact that this legislation could harm millions of people, according to its critics. And the president's team has not put forward an idea that communicates that the number of people with pre-existing conditions will not be thrown off as much as some of his critics think. And so he goes to the people who are supportive of him and rallies them in in a way that will keep them on his team. I think the reality is you want more Americans on your team, and focusing on health care and putting forward something that would get them there would be beneficial.
Yeah, and the question is, inflaming people's passions, does that get him any more votes in the healthcare debate?
It doesn't seem like it. I don't know how. I mean, it would keep people who are on the train, but it certainly wouldn't bring someone with so many groups approving of him so poorly on his team.
Right, exactly. Right, Eugene, come back in about a half hour. We have more to talk about. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Eugene.
Tonight, CNN presents a town hall debate with Republican Senators Lindsey Graham and Bill Cassidy facing off on health care against Democratic Senators Bernie Sanders and Amy Klobuchar. Jake Tapper and Dana Bash will moderate. That is tonight, 9 o'clock Eastern, right here on CNN. Overnight, the Trump administration rolling out a new travel ban. The measure imposes restrictions on certain individuals from 8 foreign countries. They are Chad, Iran, Libya, North Korea, Somalia, Syria, Venezuela, and Yemen. Now, this new list targets several non-Muslim nations, North Korea and Venezuela. In most cases, travel will be broadly suspended. In others, passengers will have to undergo enhanced screening. We get more from CNN's Laura Jarrett in Washington.
Well, the Trump administration has unveiled Travel Ban 3.0, new travel restrictions on certain foreign nationals from 8 countries: Chad, Iran, Libya, North Korea, Somalia, Syria, Venezuelan, and Yemen, as a replacement to the central portion of that controversial travel ban, which expired on Sunday morning. Now, the new restrictions vary by country, and they include a phased-in approach. So most of the limitations you won't see go into effect until mid next month on October 18th. For the last 3 months, the Trump administration has used an executive order to ban foreign nationals from 6 Muslim-majority countries from entering the U.S. unless they have a so-called bona fide relationship with a person or entity in the country. Now, individuals with that bona fide exception, like a grandparent, can still apply for visas to come to the U.S. until October 18th. But after that date, these new restrictions will begin. And on a call with reporters, a senior administration advisor called the new restrictions tough but tailored and, quote, vital to national security. The Supreme Court is also set to hear arguments on the merits of this travel ban next month, and the Justice Department will be filing an update with the Supreme Court soon.
Laura, thank you. No let-up, it seems, in the war of words between the United States and North Korea. President Trump tweeting over the weekend, just heard Foreign Minister of North Korea speak at UN. If he echoes thoughts of Little Rocket Man, they won't be around much longer. The president's latest salvo comes as the U.S. military flew bombers in international airspace near North Korea, and the Trump administration adding North Korea to the list of nations on the new travel ban. Let's bring in CNN's Ben Wiedemann. He is live in Tokyo. And Ben, there are a number of U.S. allies in this region, South Korea, Japan, where you are. How are they responding to this rhetoric between the United States and North Korea?
Well, certainly South Korea, we heard from a spokesman for the ruling party in Seoul saying that rhetoric, and he was really referring to both the United States and North Korea, is raising anxiety that was frankly already very high. Let's keep in mind there are 2 countries threatening to, in theory, fire nuclear weapons at one another, and South Korea as well as Japan are caught in the middle. Japan has been fairly quiet about the threats going in both directions. In fact, it's a little, at the moment where, in fact, the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is calling for new elections that he's hoping he'll be able to take advantage of the fact that there's been sort of a rally round effect around him as a result of the crisis with North Korea. As far as, for instance, China is concerned, which certainly isn't a U.S. ally, but it is in some ways trying to work with the American effort to persuade North Korea to stop in some form its nuclear program. We saw, for instance, there was an opinion piece in the People's Daily, which is one of the main mouthpieces of the Chinese Communist Party, in which it said that Trump's chest thumping is not helpful. So I think many of the countries who want to be part of a solution are a bit rattled by the fact that for the first time in many U.S. administrations, In fact, as far back as anybody can remember, you have a U.S. president who is speaking in many ways very like the leaders in Pyongyang. So it's a confusing new situation that they're trying to get used to.
All right, Ben Mudeman, live in Tokyo. Thank you, Ben.
All right, 18 minutes past the hour this Monday morning. 2 major aftershocks in Mexico this weekend, with the country still reeling from that deadly earthquake. We're going to go live to Mexico City next. The death toll in Mexico rising to 319 following last week's 7.1 magnitude earthquake, and a new challenge for search and rescue efforts over the weekend as 2 powerful aftershocks hit southern Mexico. CNN's Ivan Watson live in Mexico City with the very latest. What's happening there?
Good morning, Christine. That's right. There were more tremors over the weekend, and they sent at this location the rescue workers having to get off the pile of rubble behind me, the former 6-story office building that's collapsed. Now, one of the problems that shows you how difficult this work is, it's pouring rain here shortly after 4 a.m. And so we've seen all of the teams that were on the pile of rubble ordered to get off because, of course, the water can kind of change the situation up there. It's already very dangerous, very difficult work that they're doing. They believe that there are more than at least 40 people missing in that office building. They're trying to tunnel down to staircases in the 2nd and 3rd floor. And we've been told that in some cases they have found bodies of victims that they could not remove over the weekend because it was simply too unstable. Now, all around this site that I'm at, Christine, there are relatives of missing loved ones sleeping in tents and on sidewalks. As this rain has started coming down before dawn, there was a very tender moment where a volunteer came over and laid a plastic tarp over one person conducting this agonizing vigil who was just sleeping out in the open, being rained on. So that gives you a sense of kind of the mood and the atmosphere here. The death toll has risen to at least 319 dead. One of the victims was found from the site of a collapsed school on Sunday. Meanwhile, Mexico City authorities say more than 100 other schools will be back in class on Monday, and the public transport system is still free for all residents of this city. Christine?
All right, that's very good news there. Okay, thank you so much for that, and keep us posted. Thanks, Ivan Watson.
NFL players defying the president with anthem protests, taking a collective knee and a major show of solidarity.
Calling our players, SOBs and all that kind of stuff. That's not the men that I know. The men that I know in the locker room, I'm proud of. I'm proud to be associated with those people.
The NFL fighting back in a show of unity after President Trump called on team owners to fire players who kneel during the national anthem.
And time is running short for the Republican health care bill, and opposition to the bill seems to be growing by the day. This is a new version of the legislation attempts to target some key votes.
Breaking overnight, the White House rolling out a new travel ban and expanding it to 8 countries, including North Korea and Venezuela. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Early Start. I'm Christine Romans. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Christine. I'm Ryan Obles, in for Dave Briggs. It is 30 minutes past the hour. A league-wide show of solidarity. NFL players and owners united in protest against President Trump after a weekend of relentless attacks, condemning players who choose not to stand for the national anthem. In stadiums across the country Sunday, and even in London, players locked arms, kneeled, raised their fists, all during the national anthem. Now, some teams skipped the anthem entirely, staying in the locker room.
Even the national anthem singers were bending a knee. In a game in Detroit and one in Nashville, singers joined the protest, kneeling along with the players on the sidelines. This all began when the president made these remarks at a rally in Alabama Friday night.
Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get that son of a bitch off the field right now, out, he's fired. He's fired!
He didn't stop there. The president tweeting nearly a dozen times about protests by pro athletes, including this. If NFL fans refuse to go to games until players stop disrespecting our flag and country, you will see change take place fast. Fire or suspend. In response to the player demonstration Sunday, the president tweeted, "Great solidarity for our national anthem and for our country. Standing with locked arms is good. Kneeling is not acceptable. Bad ratings."
In many of those cases, they were standing with locked arms together, coaches and players, against the president calling them sons of bitches. Mike Tomlin, head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, one of 3 teams that remained in their locker rooms during the national anthem, says his players acted in unison.
We didn't ask for this. This was placed upon us by circumstance. I heard rumblings of guys talking during the course of the day yesterday. My contention was that we will not allow politics to divide us with football players, with football team. If many of them felt like something needed to be done, I asked those guys to discuss it. And whatever they discussed, that, we have 100% participation or we do nothing.
There was one Steeler player who is a former Army Ranger who did stand in the tunnel. He did stand for the national anthem. Many say President Trump, though, is capitalizing on the politics of racial division. Here's what he says.
This has nothing to do with race. I've never said anything about race. This has nothing to do with race or anything else. This has to do with respect for our country and respect for our flag.
It wasn't just the NFL. The president in the crosshairs of 2 of the world's most popular athletes, Steph Curry and LeBron James. Trump withdrawing Curry's invite to the White House with the NBA championship Golden State Warriors. That led LeBron James to tweet this, quote, "You bum. Steph Curry already said he wasn't going, so therefore ain't no invite. Going to the White House was a great honor until you showed up." Let's get more on the NFL's day of protest. With CNN's Andy Scholes joins us now. Good morning, Andy.
Hey, Christine, it was clear that players on every team had a plan on how they were going to show that they were unified after President Trump's comments. Some players took a knee, some sat on the bench, many locked arms during the national anthem. And for the first time, we saw owners from teams around the league, some who donated to President Trump's campaign, standing arm in arm with their players during the anthem, showing that they had their players' backs. After the games yesterday, players around the league explaining why they decided to do a show of unity.
I felt like he attacked our brothers, my brothers in the league, so I felt like it was appropriate to stand up with them and stand in the locker room. There's only a few times in a man's life where you have a chance to stand up for something that you believe in and make a statement. So today I thought that was that chance and I took it.
I can't stand, and support something where our leader of this country is just acting like a jerk, angry and upset about NFL players protesting in a peaceful manner.
You mess with one, you mess with us all. Nobody is divided in this. We was in unity. We want to stand for something. I'm just telling you right now, this man's not welcome here.
Now, the Steelers, Titans, and Seahawks all deciding to remain in the locker room during the national anthems yesterday. All the players except for one on the Steelers. Alejandro Villanueva is a former Army Ranger. He did 3 tours in Afghanistan after graduating from West Point. He stood in the tunnel alone with his hand on his heart. He clearly not agreeing with the team's decision to remain in the locker room during the national anthem. And, guys, it's a league rule that every player on every team is supposed to be out there on the field for the national anthem. But we reached out to the NFL, and they said they are not considering any fines or punishment for the players that remained in the locker rooms.
All right, Andy Scholes, certainly a very interesting weekend of sports, no question.
Yeah, and I don't think this conversation's over, so let's continue it with Washington Post reporter Eugene Scott. And Eugene, and Andy touched on this a little bit, there's actually quite a few Donald Trump supporters in the NFL. Many of them NFL owners, some of them coaches and former coaches. One of them, Rex Ryan, who was the coach of my beloved Buffalo Bills last year. And I distinctly remember Rex Ryan introducing Donald Trump at a very large rally in Buffalo. Listen to what Rex Ryan had to say yesterday. He's working for ESPN now. This is what he had to say about Trump's comments yesterday morning.
I'm pissed off, I'll be honest with you, because I supported Donald Trump. I sat back and when he asked me to introduce him at a rally, in Buffalo, I did that. But I'm reading these comments and it's appalling to me. And I'm sure it's appalling to almost any citizen in our country. It should be. I mean, calling our players, SOBs and all that kind of stuff. That's not the men that I know. The men that I know in the locker room, I'm proud of. I'm proud to be associated with those people.
And you know, Eugene, there were many people that weren't necessarily in agreement with Colin Kaepernick in terms of his form of protest.
Right.
But they weren't necessarily attacking him the way that the president has. Has this taken a turn from your perspective?
I think it's interesting, and people have noticed that regarding this conversation, if you decide to focus on how someone protests, policing how they express their discomfort, instead of addressing the very real issue that racial discrimination exists in this country, that's telling, and it gives people the idea what is most important to you. The fact that you won't address the fact that Kaepernick originally started by talking about the presence of police violence in America. There have been protests in St. Louis over the past week because of an incident there that President Donald Trump hasn't commented on at all. And so there's a conversation to be had. How people show their discomfort with racial discrimination is not the most important one.
Yeah, it's interesting that people's tolerance for a form of protest often has a lot to do with what someone is protesting.
You know, the president says this is not about race, and he was very vehement about that, right? But a lot of folks have said, look how quick he is to call these men sons of bitches, but how slow he was to criticize the violence in Charlottesville, how slow he was to react to that, and still going out of his way to say they were very fine people on both sides of that debate in Charlottesville. That's what this is about. You know, the president can say this is not about race, I'm not mentioning race, but there is this feeling in America, and among many of these athletes, and they've said it, that there is white privilege that Donald Trump doesn't seem to understand here, and that's at the core of the feelings of inequality.
Yeah, we have data that shows that after the election, many of the white working class and white people who weren't working class who voted for Trump were tapping into the cultural anxiety that he communicated during his administration. And I think the fact is that Donald Trump knows that it's something that rallies his base. He was in Alabama when these words were shared, a state that doesn't even have a professional NFL team. He should have been focused on helping Luther Strange get reelected, but instead he tapped into this feeling that so many of his supporters have about America's traditions and nostalgia, and some of those things changing.
Meanwhile, two of the most, I guess, famous people on the planet, LeBron James and Steph Curry. Steph Curry, you know, the White House pulled the invitation for the NBA champions, right? And this is what LeBron says: "You bum." Steph Curry already said he ain't going, so therefore, you know, going to the White House was a great honor until you showed up. It's interesting how something like a visit to the White House has been politicized under this administration.
Very much so. I mean, I've seen pieces about how former President Barack Obama really politicized or birthed activism among athletes. And so you saw athletes engaging in issues in ways that they had not in the past. And so people were going to the White House and listening to the issues that the president was addressing, and so to see them back away from wanting to be engaged with this administration is telling. And I think what's very fascinating, to your point, is seeing the expansion of people interested in this protest. It's not just Cap anymore. We have these two NBA stars, an Oakland A's catcher knelt this past weekend, and so I mean this could go further.
I gotta say, the pro-Trump media has been very quick to say, you know, these guys should play their game, stay out of politics. I mean, rich celebrities talking about politics, totally, you know, not appropriate. Donald Trump was a rich celebrity talking about politics before he became a president of the United States.
It's very difficult to make the case that entertainers should not be involved in policy when you backed an entertainer. The reality is Donald Trump isn't just an entertainer. LeBron isn't just an NBA player. And so they bring all of their identities to these issues, and we should hear them out.
Yeah, we're a long way away from Michael Jordan saying that Republicans buy Yankees too.
Absolutely.
Different. All right, thank you, Eugene. And this topic, many of these topics could come up tonight in a town hall debate about health care, with Republican Senators Lindsey Graham and Bill Cassidy facing off against Democratic Senators Bernie Sanders and Amy Klobuchar. Jake Tapper and Dana Bash will moderate. That's tonight, 9 o'clock Eastern, right here on CNN.
All right, travel ban 3.0, and 3 nations are added to the U.S. travel ban list, including North Korea. We'll get reaction from the region next.
Breaking overnight, the Trump administration rolling out a new travel ban. The measure imposes restrictions on certain individuals from 8 foreign countries: Chad, Iran, Libya, Syria, Venezuela, and Yemen. The new list targets several non-Muslim nations, including North Korea and Venezuela. In most cases, travel will be broadly suspended. In others, passengers will have to undergo enhanced screenings. Let's get more now from CNN's Laura Jarrett in Washington.
Well, the Trump administration has unveiled Travel Ban 3.0, new travel restrictions on certain foreign nationals from 8 countries: Chad, Iran, Libya, North Korea, Somalia, Syria, Venezuela, and Yemen, as a replacement to the central portion of that controversial travel ban, which expired on Sunday morning. Now, the new restrictions vary by country, and they include a phased-in approach. So most of the limitations you won't see go into effect until mid-next month on October 18th. For the last 3 months, the Trump administration has used an executive order to ban foreign nationals from 6 Muslim-majority countries from entering the U.S. unless they have a so-called bona fide relationship with a person or entity in the country. Now, individuals with that bona fide exception, like a grandparent, can still apply for visas to come to the U.S. until October 18th. But after that date, these new restrictions will begin. And on a call with reporters, a senior administration advisor called the new restrictions tough but tailored and, quote, vital to national security. The Supreme Court is also set to hear arguments on the merits of this travel ban next month, and the Justice Department will be filing an update with the Supreme Court soon.
All right, Laura Jarrett, thank you for that. No let up, it seems, in the war of words between the United States and North Korea. President Trump tweeting over the weekend. Just heard Foreign Minister of North Korea speak at UN. If he echoes thoughts of Little Rocket Man, they won't be around much longer. The president's latest salvo coming as the U.S. military flew bombers in international airspace near North Korea, and the Trump administration adding North Korea to the list of nations on the new travel ban. I want to bring in CNN's Ben Wiedemann. He is live in Tokyo for us. What's the reaction in the region to this rhetoric between the U.S. and North Korea? This is the second time the president has threatened destruction of North Korea, something that we know inside the Hermit Kingdom it feeds right into the storyline for its leader.
And not just the second time. Let's recall back in August, he threatened fire and fury against North Korea. And therefore, yes, all of this rhetoric, this back and forth has been very disconcerting for countries like Japan and Korea, which are very much, South Korea, which are very much in the crossfire. Now, what's interesting is that under the Clinton, the Bush, and the Obama administrations, the Americans always tried to stress that North Korea's nuclear program is a regional problem that affects China, Japan, South Korea, and others. But as a result of this sort of back and forth of personal attacks and invective between President Trump and President Kim Jong-un, it's sort of become very much a one-on-one verbal fight between the two, leaving, for instance, South Korea very concerned. We heard one of the spokesmen for the ruling party in Seoul saying that all of this is heightening anxiety. We heard, we saw an editorial in one of the newspapers in Beijing saying that President Trump's chest thumping is unhelpful at the moment. So we have countries sort of caught in the middle, concerned that this, at least the rhetoric at the moment, is getting out of control.
Yeah, I'd say so. Where's the off-ramp? All right, thank you so much for that, Ben Wiedemann, for us in Tokyo. All right, time for a look at what's coming up on New Day. Allison Camerata joins us. Good morning.
Good morning, guys. Great to see you. So obviously, we're going to have all of the threads and all of the debate over the NFL protest this morning. And I'm calling in an assist from John Berman because he and I will be having these debates with all of our guests, and we have a great lineup.
Oh, my God. Dante Stallworth, Ernest Biner, George
Bob
Martin,
Costas.
Bob Costas. We could feel like a great football team and do the play-by-play the whole time.
Let's do that.
We totally should.
Okay, so we're going to be doing that this morning. Obviously, also all of the latest in healthcare for you, what's happening with Graham Cassidy. And then we're also going to have Daddy Yankee on with all of the efforts. Do you know what do you know Daddy Yankee?
No.
Behind the blockbuster.
I hope you're going to tell me, because right now it sounds like a pet name you have for somebody. That's sort of creepy.
That's Big Daddy.
Okay.
But Daddy Yankee is behind the smash blockbuster Despacito, and of course he's helping
Pop
out.
culture.
Pop culture.
That's where I went wrong.
That's right. But also, obviously, on a serious note, Puerto Rico and what he's doing for the efforts there. So all of that when we see you at the top of the hour.
All right, nice to see you guys. Happy Monday, everybody. All right, President Trump is picking fights with the sports world, including Under Armour endorser Steph Curry. And now Under Armour is drawing criticism for how it responded to the president. CNN Money Stream next.
The death toll in Mexico rising again, now up to 320 following last week's 7.1 magnitude earthquake. A new challenge for search and rescue efforts over the weekend as two powerful aftershocks hit southern Mexico. Let's go live now to CNN's Ivan Watson. He is in Mexico City. We talked about the aftershocks already, Ivan, and of course you're dealing with rain there this morning. How's that complicating the recovery efforts?
Well, that's right. I mean, it's shortly before 5 a.m. This is supposed to be a 24-hour operation here at this collapsed 6-story office building where there are at least 40 people believed to be missing. When the rain comes, the workers were all warned to get off because it's already dangerous, treacherous work on this pile of rubble. And then the downpour complicates it further. It also makes it very difficult for the poor relatives and families that are conducting a vigil, camping out here on the sidewalks in tents, in sleeping bags, stuck out under this chilly rain as well. Now, the death toll did rise. There was the body of an unidentified adult woman removed from another site, a collapsed school in another part of Mexico City. And that location, you've had at least 19 school children who were killed in the collapse and 7 adults. And there was a somber church ceremony for those child victims at Sunday, at a Sunday mass there. Meanwhile, the Mexico City authorities say more than 100 other schools will be back in class today, a slight sign of improvement after this natural disaster, Ryan.
All right, Ivan Watson live in Mexico City. Thank you.
All right, First Lady Melania Trump meeting Britain's Prince Harry as she led the U.S. delegation to the Invictus Games in Toronto over the weekend. It was her first solo foreign trip as First Lady. The two met for about 20 minutes. Melania Trump extending an invitation to His Royal Highness to visit the White House. She attended the opening ceremony on Saturday along with Harry and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Prince Harry started the Invictus Games competition back in 2014 to support wounded warriors. All right, let's get a check on CNN Money Stream this Monday morning. Global stock markets beginning the week lower after Wall Street finished mixed. Still, the Dow hit its second consecutive week of gains. U.S. stocks Friday fell early in the day. They were spooked by developments in North Korea, but then they rebound, driven by healthcare stocks after Senator John McCain said he would not support the GOP healthcare bill. Right now, U.S. stock futures are lower. Big corporate deal potentially. T-Mobile and Sprint closing in on a deal that would shake up the U.S. wireless market. Reuters reporting a possible merger between the two. Combined, the third and fourth largest carriers would have 130 million subscribers. That's just behind Verizon and AT&T. T-Mobile and Sprint first attempted to merge 3 years ago. They abandoned that plan when it looked like regulators would kill the deal. But experts say the business-friendly Trump administration may be more receptive to a merger. President Trump picking fights with the sports world, including Under Armour endorser Steph Curry. The president disinvited Curry and the entire Golden State Warriors team from visiting the White House. Now, Under Armour is being criticized for how it responded to the president. Now, the brand first tweeted that it stands by our athletes for free speech, expression, and a unified America. But then it deleted that tweet and replaced it with this. Look there, it stands by the flag and by our athletes for free speech. The tweet drew sharp criticism. Many accused the company of riding the fence and not picking sides, taking pains not to pick sides. Curry has been a huge boon for Under Armour. His signature line has significantly boosted Under Armour sales. Interesting, right? Politics, business, sports, all one